Sylvia and me.
Sylvia and
Sylvia and me. Sylvia and
Sylvia and me.
Sylvia.
I like to contextualize beauty as, beauty, freedom, truth, love. It is one of the inherent human longings. I don't think there's a way in which we stop caring about beauty, nor do I think we should. My position is that what the beauty industry sells is not beauty, of course. It reels us in by calling it beauty and assigning it these sort of metaphysical meanings, these metaphysical powers that it actually doesn't have. I really think we would be better off if we called the beauty industry the appearance industry.
Hi, I'm Sylvia Beckerman, host of the podcast series Sylvia and Me. Conversations with inspiring, empowering women.
Hi, my name is Jessica DeFino. I'm a beauty journalist. I've written for the New York Times, Allure, Vogue, and now I write the newsletter, The Review of Beauty.
And welcome.
And welcome to Sylvia and Me.
Jessica, thank you so much. I am so happy to have you here with me today. I came across a couple of your newsletters on social media. One that caught my eye, you wrote about the Barbie movie and all the things that, no matter what it was saying, it was really promoting so many other things from it. And that was
right.
The result. As you said, you do a newsletter. It's called The Review of Beauty. And prior to that, it was called The Unpublishable.
Yes.
And it was called The Unpublishable, I believe, because although you had worked in the beauty industry, you were writing basically a critical investigation of the beauty industry. And so therefore you couldn't find anyone who would publish it.
Right.
And since you started, you have over 100,000 readers. It's led to commissions from the New York Times, the Sunday Times, and a monthly advice garden at the Guardian. It's been awarded several awards, and it's garnered interviews from some very notable people. So therefore, it's no longer unpublishable. And as you put out in one newsletter, you have now renamed it to The Review of Beauty.
Yeah, that's correct.
We're going to talk about the beauty industry, which you say the combination of those two words, that there's not a more nonsensical combination of words than the beauty industry. And
right.
Can you explain that?
Sure. I got into critiquing the beauty industry because I am obsessed with beauty. I love beauty. And I think that's a pretty natural urge. Like I like to contextualize beauty as, beauty, freedom, truth, love. It is one of the inherent human longings. I don't think there's a way in which we stop caring about beauty, nor do I think we should. My position is that what the beauty industry sells is not beauty, of course. It reels us in by calling it beauty and assigning it these sort of metaphysical meanings, these metaphysical powers that it actually doesn't have. I really think we would be better off if we called the beauty industry the appearance industry, because that's what it does. It takes this sort of, almost spiritual, metaphysical concept of beauty, it flattens it to the physical dimension, and it refocuses it on ourselves, on what we look like, and it defines beauty in very narrow parameters. So of course we're all drawn to beauty. What the beauty industry sells is not that. And, that's why we keep buying and applying. It's an unfillable void.
And it is an unfillable void, because every time something comes out, something else comes out. And then all of a sudden they add something else to it. Now they're talking about adding estrogen into a facial cream. They're talking about adding retinol into something else, and they're without any true studies behind any of this. And it's so unregulated that the promises that are out there, and everyone's looking for something. So many of us are looking for that magic whatever. And even if you don't call something anti-aging, what they have started to do now is let's prevent aging. And you can't prevent aging. And you
No,
really can't, not really, you can't go back in time
no.
unless you watch a movie and, Back to the Future, but it's just not happening. And we fall into this. I want to just jump into one thing right now that really, really bothers me, and that is all the press about the young children, 5 years and up,
Mhm.
or who are starting to angst over their appearance and their skin.
Right.
Can you talk to that? I know you did, again, you did a newsletter
Mhm.
regarding that.
Yeah, I think this is a big topic in the beauty industry right now is, the phenomenon of what they're calling the Sephora tweens. It's young girls who are going into Sephora, buying all of these products, a lot of anti-aging products, a lot of really intense cosmetic chemicals. Um, and I think some of the criticism of this or some of the articles about this are a little misplaced. I don't think we can blame children for
Oh,
what they're doing. It's just this is the world that we have created for them. We have created an impossible beauty standard. We have made beauty sort of the core focus of girlhood and womanhood. And, it's a natural childhood thing to sort of imitate what you see adults do, what you see teens do, what you see your mother do. That's like a fine and healthy impulse. It's essential to growing up. I think what we have to look at is what we have shown the children is womanhood, is adulthood, is being a grown up, and is important to their like sense of self and identity. And that's where the problem is. Um, I think this could actually be like a great teaching moment for the beauty industry because a lot of our daily beauty routines sort of seem like perverse and dystopian when we see a 5-year-old imitating it. And I think the question is like, if this is sort of disturbing for a child, why isn't it as disturbing, at least like psychologically, mentally, for us, for adults? Like the truth is the standard of beauty is like pretty disturbing and upsetting across the board. It's just that as adults, we are used to it. It is so embedded in our lives and our behaviors and our sense of self. And I think seeing this mirrored in children, if handled the right way, could be a wake up call for some people.
it could be, but it's very frightening to know that these little children are being brought into Sephora by an adult. They can't
Yeah,
exactly at 5, 6, or 7 go out there, drive a car, or take a bus or
right.
something to get to these stores.
Yeah. And the thing is like, while this might be a new iteration of it, this is like a very old impulse. I think it really mirrors at least what my generation experienced with diet culture. And I'm sure generations before me experienced too. Very often your mother um, or the, female adults in your lives are the first ones that really introduce you to the idea of beauty standards, to the idea that you should look a certain way and give you behaviors to mimic or even prescribe behaviors for you. Growing up, it was like Slim Fast and
Oh,
Special K and all of these things to lose weight. And of course, I think one way to look at this and one way we have to look at this is like a lot of the passing down of beauty standards and beauty behaviors is a sort of act of love and protection on a mother's part. Very often, they know that women in the world are judged based on what they look like. They're valued based on how well they can adhere to a standard of beauty. And you want the best for your children. And I'm not saying this is a healthy way to go about it, but I think that impulse is often very loving in some ways, and you want your child to have the best and look their best because you know that that is important to how the world will treat them. um, what I think is misguided is we shouldn't be continuously molding ourselves to meet this impossible standard. We should be reforming the standard to make it not such a part of our lives and our values to society, our value to society.
exactly. You mentioned diets and disordered eating, bulimia, and so on are very dangerous,
Yeah.
exceedingly dangerous. And
Mhm.
these are, behaviors that unfortunately either are handed down or the child sees what the destruction is being done
Mhm.
to someone who is suffering from an eating disordered eating. You
Mm.
also talk about dermorexia.
Yeah, dermorexia.
It's another one of these. Can you go into that, because it's on
Sure.
the same vein as what we're talking about as far as
Mhm.
the children, and
Right.
basically it's not even makeup, it's skincare.
A lot of skincare. Yeah, I mean, dermorexia is a term that I coined, and obviously I'm not a medical professional.
Nope, we're not.
I just, sort of floated this term out there to potentially describe some behaviors that I'm seeing develop, which is a disordered obsession with the skin, with skincare, with meeting the beauty ideal at all costs in a way that, even though it's messaged as health and well-being, often has a detrimental effect on our health and well-being, the same way that the standard of thinness is glorified as this healthy ideal, but often our ways of becoming thin through disordered eating, through anorexia, bulimia, orthorexia, actually diminish our overall health and wellness. So I see this pattern repeating with skincare, in terms of like some of the detrimental physical effects it can have and some of the detrimental psychological effects it can have, when a normal just daily skincare routine becomes obsessive. And there's a, a wide body of science that speaks to the skin brain connection. The skin and the brain are wired in our body through a network of nerves and neurons. It's called the skin brain axis. And this shows up, all the time. I like to say, like, when you're embarrassed and you blush, that's a skin brain connection. Um, there are psychological disorders. I actually have one of them, trichotillomania, which is hair pulling, um, dermatillomania, which is skin picking. And these are another example of the skin brain connection working in like a not so positive way, right? So, I mean, we've even seen studies come up that categorize repeated use of injectables and cosmetic procedures as potentially addictive. So I think the research is there to suggest that the skin and the brain have this connection, and the development of a disordered obsession with the skin is possible. And so, yeah, I started talking about it in terms of dermorexia to hopefully, get this issue on people's radars, and hopefully like prompt more research into whether or not this could be considered a disordered way of participating in the beauty industry.
It really, I'm glad you did, because it's an addiction that is growing. And once somebody gets into it, if they're looking to look younger, it's not going to happen. If they're looking to look the best that they can, that's different. But the beauty industry, again, with their, how they market, and with social media and influencers and young girls on TikTok showing, all these little videos of, oh, isn't this great? And so on and so forth. It's it's a domino effect, and it is becoming an addiction in so many ways. And if we really don't learn from this now, it's only going to get worse. It's not going to get better, because as we have all these new companies that you now can go online and it's a virtual doctor, and they supposedly, do a little checkup virtually, and
Mhm.
they ask you questions which you could answer any way you want. Then all of a sudden you're sucked in to the subscription of items you never even heard of before, that
Mhm.
have promises that can't be met, and money just going out. And when people don't see the results, all of a sudden, they want more and more and more. And it just, it's a
Mhm.
rabbit hole.
I would
It,
also add that, many times they do see results. I think sort of sometimes a misconception of my work is that I'm saying none of this works anyway, don't do it. A lot of these products do exactly what they say they're going to do aesthetically. And that is what keeps us coming back. You see a little bit of result and you're like, wow. But the question is, I think we need to make the distinction between aesthetic manipulation of the skin and the
Yes.
health and functioning of the skin, because a lot of things that can make us look a certain way that society has deemed beautiful are actually counter to the things that the skin needs to be healthy, to function, to protect us, to retain water, all of the things it's meant to do that have no aesthetic component to them, right? So there's that. And then the other thing that it brought up for me when you were saying that is like a lot of times these products will have an immediate, quote unquote, positive effect. You'll put it on, you'll feel a result right away, a change right away. And that is, not technically addictive, but maybe, anecdotally addictive. You're like, oh, great, this works. So a lot of times the products will work in the moment, and what we don't realize is the long-term effects when it stops working, when it starts having maybe the opposite effect on the skin, when it starts dehydrating us or starts making our skin peel because we're doing too much to it. So yeah, it's really tricky territory because it's not that these products don't work. Some of them do. I think we just have a very sort of messed up view of efficacy and the goal of the skin.
Exactly. And you're right. Some of them do work, especially some that will freeze like your under eye, and you're not supposed to put moisturizer on before. And you start thinking, if you're talking about skin health, you start questioning, well, if I'm not supposed to put moisturizer on and it's just supposed to drag everything down, so it takes away whatever for the time that it does, what is it really doing underneath there? We
Right.
don't
Yeah. A
know.
lot of these things just are very nonsensical, or like will often have like a paradoxical effect on the skin over time, right? And yeah, it all comes back to the difference between aesthetic results and functional results. I think the other thing that's really concerning to me in some of the topics that you're bringing up, the things that we are, attempting to fight or battle with skincare very often don't need to be fought or battled. They're just basic human features, things like pores, things like wrinkles, things like texture. You're going to have that if you're a living, breathing human being. Um, and so, yeah, I think it's really something that deserves more attention is like, what have we labeled a so-called flaw and why? And is that a flaw or is that just a feature? Is that just like by design? Um, yeah.
Exactly. I read an article the other day that more men now are doing cosmetic surgery between the Botox and the fillers and this, and then there's always something else that's coming out. And as you said, for a lot of people, it becomes an obsession.
Mm-hmm.
And obsessions like that, at some point, as you do get older, it's going to stop working. Something's going, and we still don't know what the long-term effects are because no one's going to go out there after using it for 15, 20 years and say, oh, look, because they'll just get more if they think they haven't gotten the results that they would have gotten 10 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of murky science. I don't think there have been many like extremely long-term studies on the effects of certain injectables. I mean, I think last year we actually saw a lot of research come out about some of the potentially distressing effects of fillers over time, migrating to different parts of the face, causing the skin to be descended or sagging. And again, it's like that paradoxical effect. You get it to look plumper and youthful, and then over time, it may, for some people, have the opposite effect. So yeah, there's still so much more research that needs to be done because, of course, a lot of doctors say these injectables are, relatively safe, pretty safe as far as cosmetic interventions go. And that may be true, but there's also, for every procedure you get, for every surgery you get, there's going to be potential minor and major risks. And yeah, I would love to see more long-term studies on those be done.
Let's talk about the saying, beauty's in the eye of the beholder.
Mm-hmm.
Is it really? How does
Well,
that make us fall into, again, another societal and almost, we're shaping beauty in such a societal, financial, even political. I mean, it's just
Mhm.
has huge consequences. So tell me about
Right.
beauty's in the eye of the beholder.
I mean, I think in some context, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, can certainly be true. I don't necessarily think it's true when we're talking about um, our own physical appearance and the standard of beauty of what is currently considered beautiful, particularly in terms of a beautiful woman. These beauty standards are not like they're not biological. They're not just like built into human beings to prefer, one sort of feature over another. They have been constructed culturally mainly as tools of oppression. And, you know, it's the more you see one certain standard of beauty, the more you internalize that. And what society deems beautiful becomes what you deem beautiful, not because it's coming from some like inherent innate part of you, but because it's what you're surrounded by. And I mean, this is just how, you know, desire works. This is just how these things work. Again, I don't think it's necessarily a question of how do we completely detangle our own desires or what we find beautiful from what other people do for what some society deems beautiful. It's how do we create or how do we dismantle this particular um, sort of inhuman, unattainable ideal from like our idea of beauty, and how do we make a culture, politically, financially, economically, all of this uh you know work toward a more equal or egalitarian concept of beauty, perhaps.
Okay.
Yeah,
Tell me about the word ugly.
I love it. Bring back ugly. I'm yeah, ugly rights. Um, yeah, so I have an advice column, a monthly advice column at The Guardian, and it's called Ask Ugly. And the reason that I chose that name is because it sort of speaks to this idea that like there is no one idea of beauty or there is no one idea of ugly really, and it was inspired by two pieces of feedback I often get on my critiques of the beauty industry. So one, I'll, for instance, write an article about anti-aging, and I'll get a response that says, "You are too young and beautiful to know anything about anti-aging, like please shut up." Or two, if I write a critique of the beauty industry, I'll often get like, "You're too ugly to trust about anything in the
Yes,
beauty
ma'am.
industry." Oh, all the time, all the time. I've got the screenshots to prove it. So it's interesting, depending on who's reading and whether or not they agree with what I'm saying, or whether or not they perceive me as being able to have a valuable opinion on this thing. I'm either too beautiful to talk about beauty or too ugly to talk about beauty. So I just thought that was kind of a funny name to call it Ask Ugly and sort of embrace, like, yeah, I don't need everyone to think that I'm particularly beautiful. And not only beautiful people should be part of this conversation of what constitutes beauty.
And what is our definition of
Right.
beauty?
Right.
What is our definition of ugly? It's perceptions. It's, everyone has their own. Yes, influencers will tell us, certain things, and but you know,
Well, and I often say like a lot of things that in the beauty industry that are, deemed grotesque or ugly at some point, when they're associated with wealth and influence and popularity, they become seen as beautiful over time. I think like Kylie Jenner's lip fillers are a good example of this. I remember when she first got lip filler, there was a ton of criticism, and it was just like, that doesn't look good. That's too much. Why would she do this? It's ugly. And now, 5, 10 years later, that is the standard of what people in the beauty industry consider beautiful, is this very plump, filled, artificially enhanced look. So anytime there's like a beauty thing that comes out and people are calling it ugly, I'm like, give it 5 years And if enough rich people do it, you're going to think it's beautiful soon too. Like, and we see this throughout history. You know, the standard of beauty has changed from era to era, from culture to culture. Like, it changes. It's not one set thing, which again is also a little hopeful, because if it changes, like, we have the opportunity to change it in a healthier direction, perhaps.
But with everything, with social media, with influencers, with everything that's going on now, do you see a healthy change in the near future, or do you see it getting worse
No,
until it gets
I
better?
don't think I necessarily see a healthy change in the near future. I hope for a healthy change in the near future, or anytime. Um, but yeah, I mean, I guess that's why I do this work, is because I do have a hope that it can change. If not a sort of cynical hope.
I fully agree with you. As I started, the conversation off, what really bothers me are these young children who are now being pulled in. Yes, years ago, something that was a treat for a little girl was going to the nail salon with her mother and getting her nails done, and that was just maybe once a month, once every 2 months. Now you see these little girls in there on a weekly basis. They're getting, their nails done and so on. Instead of just being a treat. And years ago, I used to say, so at the age of 16, this is happening. What are they going to want when they're 18, 20, 22? And the standard, again, some people are out there in the beauty industry trying to talk 16-year-olds into getting Botox, saying that it's a preventable, it will prevent you from what? You're going to get older no matter what.
Mm.
And who knows that is doing, and what is that telling a young teenager who has so much else that they have to face?
Right. Well, I mean, it's a physical manifestation of ageism. You know, I like to say every beauty standard is a physical manifestation of a system of oppression. So we live in a pretty ageist society. Anti-aging is the physical outgrowth of ageism. I read a really interesting article in, I think, the Financial Times a while ago about it, and they described ageism as future discrimination against the self. Because like you said, yeah, of course, you're going to get old. So I do think it's really important to sort of start to dismantle that. There was also a study that showed people with a negative outlook on aging actually tend to die 7 years earlier than people who have a positive outlook. So in some ways, you could say this, like, all-encompassing obsession with anti-aging might actually be working, since the only way to anti-age is to die. A sort of a bleak way to look at that. But yeah, these are just like real, actual concerning things with like material harms. It's not as simple as, oh, I want to look younger. It's being part of a larger system of discrimination that has so many other outcomes besides, the physical.
Yeah, it does, because their mental health is so involved in it, and will be decimated by all of this fear of not getting old, getting older, and we cannot stop getting older, but we could embrace it and look forward to it. A 16-year-old should be able to look
Yeah.
forward to going off to starting anew, whether it be college or a career or
Right.
traveling or something, instead
Yeah.
of this fear of
Right.
what am I going to look like?
Well, I mean, I would also say like the fear is inevitable and also just healthy and part of being a human. Like, getting older is scary. Things changing in your life is scary. Getting closer to your mortality is scary. Like, we cannot stop the fear of getting older. But we can question, hey, why is um physically anti-aging part of this fear? Like, you can feel the fear. You can be honest about feeling the fear. Like, it is a very, you know, scary thing to enter new life phases. And I think that's fine. I don't think we need to have like a physical aesthetic manipulation response to that fear. And I think that's part of maybe starting to change this standard, is not saying aging is wonderful, embrace it, everything can be great, you don't have to be afraid. We can say like, yeah, it's really fucking scary. And guess what? Like, getting Botox isn't going to make you feel less scared of eventually dying. Like, you know?
Well, at the age of 16 or 18, 20 or 30, we don't have to really think about death, not on a regular basis unless there's something wrong. But as we do get older, there are times when we don't have to, if we embrace it and maybe turn that fear a little bit around into, you never know what's going to happen, and take away that fear of what you're going to look like.
Right.
It's really, I know what it's like getting older, and for me, I've embraced every single decade I've gotten older, because it's been better than the one before. Not everyone can do that, but it's your mindset. And if we can at least do as you say and take that one fear of what am I going to look like, and get that and embrace who we are as a person at that particular time. You take care of yourself, but don't totally make yourself mentally unwell because you're trying to fit what you think society says you're supposed to be doing and look like as you get to a certain stage in your life.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So, what I'd like is if you had one thing that you wanted to tell women in their 20s or 30s right now, what would you tell them?
Ooh, that's a good question. I really hate being prescriptive. I guess maybe my thing would be, if beauty is of extreme importance to you and your life, that makes it worthy of examining and makes it worthy of critique. I think a lot of times I hear like, this is just for fun, or like, you know, it's not that serious, it's just what I like. If you like it and it's taking up a big part of your time, your money, your effort, your energy on a daily basis, that means it is worthy of examining, and it is worthy of looking into, and it is worthy into diving a little deeper and examining what participation in the beauty industry is actually doing for you, and whether that's something that you want to continue investing your time, money, and energy into.
Jessica, I think we leave it at that, because I think that is so well said. Where can people find out more about you?
You can find out more about me through my newsletter, The Review of Beauty, or through my monthly column at The Guardian, Ask Ugly. I'm there every month.
Jessica, thank you so much, because as we talked about, this is almost just the beginning of this vortex that so many are falling into. And what you're doing is really such a help, and diving into something that a lot of people won't dive into. And you're definitely not ugly. I mean, people are so ridiculous.
Well, the great thing about my work is I almost don't care either way, but thank you.
Thank you so much. You can find us on all of your popular podcast platforms. And of course, our website, sylviaandme.com. Stay safe, stay healthy, and as always, stay tuned.